When a serial killer is captured, there's an elite band of experts called upon by the police to help interview the deadliest category of murderer. Psychologists, psychiatrists, and profilers, they are men and women who have spent their entire working lives face to face with some of the most dangerous killers the world has ever known.
Too many similarities for the question not to be asked, and for you not to say why.
No comment.
No comment.
They paint the image that I was this monster who picked up like these altar boys along the street and swatted them like flies. I said, this is ludicrous.
I am sorry for all the pain that my actions have caused. I am prepared to die if you say it is necessary.
After working for decades intimately with the most violent people alive, our experts have developed the skills to protect themselves.
If you don't distance yourself, it will get to you over time.
I do not want some of the stuff going through their minds to be running around inside mine.
Every time that you are called upon to do it, you have to take a deep breath and you have to go back into that darkness.
Now, for the first time, these experts have come together to see if there are any common factors in the lives of serial killers that have pushed seemingly ordinary men and women to commit this most heinous of crimes.
I don't believe anyone is born a serial killer.
We need to know the motivation and what they're getting out of it.
What's feeding their fetishes?
Lack of love, lack of family bonding, lack of affection, punishment.
Could these combined factors reach a breaking point that could push the individual over the edge and help us understand what it takes to make a monster?
Serial killing is the malign waste product of a dysfunctional culture.
This is the story of Stephen Griffiths, a man who spent the entirety of his life training to become a serial killer, eventually mercilessly killing 3 women.
So why did you feel the need to kill any of the girls? Fun?
I don't know. I don't know. Well, I'm misanthropic. I don't have much time for the human race.
A lifelong student of the macabre, Griffiths' dark studies would culminate with taking a PhD in Victorian serial murder.
He's a doctor of serial killing. He has a PhD in his mind at killing prostitutes.
Griffiths' interest in serial murder would extend further, beyond the realms of the university library and academia. He was determined to put the knowledge he had gained into practice and see his own name join the ranks of serial killers that he'd long revered. And in 2009, he achieved his morbid ambition.
He was following in the footsteps of one of his favourite serial killers, the Yorkshire Ripper.
Are you saying that you've killed Susan Rushworth?
Yes.
And what was the other name?
Shelley Armitage.
Are you saying that you've murdered Shelley Armitage?
Yes.
And then the last one?
Susan Blamer.
You say you murdered her?
Yes.
He wanted to stand out, and of course the ultimate way of standing out from his point of view is to be recognised as this unique killer and to stand in the hall of fame, as it were, with these other people that he then comes to value.
In a matter of months, Griffiths had murdered 3 victims in an almost identical way, something he knew was prerequisite for being classified as a serial killer. He even awarded himself a self-glorifying nickname.
Well, this is a man who gave himself the tabloid headline as his name, didn't he? The Crossbow Cannibal. Well, it's like Hannibal the Cannibal. It's a catchy name that he would like to have forever associated with him. And of course in that he's been successful.
Griffiths wanted the world to believe he was a serial killer like no other, who had hunted and eaten his victims like prey. But what is the real truth behind this man? What could possibly have turned him into a monster? Born on Christmas Eve 1969 in Dewsbury, West Yorkshire, Stephen Griffiths was the eldest of 3 children. A relatively uneventful childhood was interrupted when his parents split up. He remained living with his mum, despite holding her responsible for the breakdown of the marriage.
The word devastating has been used on several occasions when his parents split up.
Dr. Julian Boone is a leading forensic psychologist. His expertise in offender profiling has earned him a reputation as the real cracker.
It's my understanding from the reports of people who knew the family that he had, quote, utter contempt for his mother. And she herself was rumoured by the local neighbours to be a prostitute and would think nothing of being naked with various men in the garden in their place in Wakefield. I think it's not impossible that his contempt towards his mother could be transposed onto women in general. It's not impossible.
To ease tensions at home, in 1982, Griffith's father, a frozen food salesman, found the money to send 13-year-old Stephen to a £9,000 a year public school. But the boy soon developed a bad attitude.
There would seem to be an element of him that wouldn't be told anything. He knew better than everybody else, and ultimately didn't even get as far as taking his A-levels, is my understanding, at that good school. When one sees from an early age what might be described as intellectual arrogance, I know more about it than anybody else. You have got someone who you just have a sense of being intellectually aloof from everyone else. And of course that can lead to underachieving, because you don't need to learn this, you don't need to learn that, you know it.
Although Griffiths failed to get his A-levels at the school, he did learn about an infamous ex-pupil, acid bath serial killer John George Haigh. The grisly link is thought to have made a lasting impression on a young Stephen Griffiths, who stood out as a loner. He was often seen carrying a briefcase containing a knife and speaking of his fascination with weapons and martial arts magazines. Dr. Eric Cullen, a forensic psychologist, has treated some of the UK's most prolific killers. He thinks that the seeds of what Griffiths was to become were sown in his adolescence.
Stephen Griffiths, unusual in serial killing because there's not very much in his childhood or formative period to suggest the monster that he was to become. We really have to go to his teenage years before we start seeing some of the early, rather morbid fascination with violence and weapons, especially knives. He also, at this stage, is beginning to introduce himself to a criminal lifestyle.
In 1986, aged 17, Griffiths decided to merge his burgeoning career in shoplifting with his fascination for weapons at his local supermarket.
He went into that shop, as I understand it, to steal. When he was confronted by the shop owner or shopkeeper, suddenly out comes a knife, and he thought nothing about inflicting a knife wound which required 18 stitches to be fixed up. And of course that's got to be a dangerous warning sign. It needs to be understood why he was carrying that knife at that point. We've got a young kid who's carrying a knife and stealing things. Collectively, it don't make for a pretty picture.
Griffiths was sentenced to 3 years behind bars. At the time, he told probation officers that he fantasized about becoming a serial killer, but this was dismissed as bravado. On his release, he enrolled at a local college to study his A-levels before being accepted at Leeds University to do a degree in psychology.
One thing that really stands out about Griffiths is that he seems to have been somebody who didn't really have much of a sense of connection with other people. And feeling different, it's almost as if he tried to make himself as different and as shocking as he could possibly be.
During this time, Griffiths became a goth, embracing an alternative lifestyle. This, combined with his obsession with weapons and a growing menagerie of reptiles, made him increasingly estranged from his peers.
Yeah, it's fascinating because he was making attempts, I think, to present an image of being someone of menace, someone of substance, but also someone who was outside the normal convention. I mean, he had pet lizards that he would take for walks. He would wear black leather. He would slick his hair back. He was conspicuous, and yet no one took him seriously. Friends would dismiss him as relatively harmless, which must have galled him because that was throwing contempt. That was still seeing the Stephen Griffiths character. That was the loser.
I think the fact that a lot of people didn't take him seriously and just regarded him as a rather creepy oddball, that would have really compounded his sense of rejection and therefore perhaps his determination to be somebody in his own terms. It's as if he couldn't really successfully play the game with other people, so he'd disregard the rules altogether and very much engage in his own pursuits and do things which, well, were genuinely shocking.
His arrogance shows that he's trying to establish his image of himself by building himself up in his own eyes in an extreme way. And the consequence of that is that you isolate yourself from other people and you look down on them. Because what you really want is to be different, and what you really fear is that you're not.
At this stage in his life, he's probably lost. He's probably sufficiently engaged in this isolated inner reality of a morbid, increasingly obsessional fascination with knives and violence and death and the links between them, and especially his fascination with and growing respect for serial killing. But he's still sufficiently competent and cognizant to pursue and achieve a first in psychology from the University of Leeds. Quite an achievement. So we've still got a man who's functioning in the real world to quite a successful degree.
Behind the scenes, Griffiths' fascination with the macabre continued. A string of convictions followed for carrying weapons in public. And in 1992, when he perceived a girl was laughing at him, he held a knife to her throat and was given a 2-year prison sentence, during which his mental health was assessed.
He was sectioned under the Mental Health Act and found himself in Rampton, which is a secure mental hospital, where he came under the tender mercy of very knowledgeable psychiatrists. And during that period of analysis, he was described variously as not suitable for treatment, not mentally ill, through to having a severe personality disorder, dangerous, and right the way up to schizoid psychopath.
Schizoid, just to be clear, does not mean schizophrenic as detached from reality. It just means you don't need to be with other people. And you don't need other people. You're walled off from a need to be with them. You can converse and do that sort of thing, but you're not really interested in having friends and partners and that sort of thing.
The significance of these various and rather disparate mental health descriptions are that all of them have the same consequences in terms of the implication for psychiatry, and that is that they wash their hands of him. He is not suitable for treatment. Doesn't matter how unstable or dangerous he is, he's simply not in their province, not in their remit, not their responsibility.
Despite the warning signs, Griffiths was released without treatment to pursue his warped interests. By now, Griffiths had developed an all-consuming obsession with one serial murderer in particular, Peter Sutcliffe, known as the Yorkshire Ripper, who murdered 13 prostitutes in Bradford in the 1970s. In 1996, at the age of 27, Griffiths decided to move to the red light district in Bradford to familiarise himself with his hero's hunting ground. Dr. Samantha Lundrigan is a psychologist who specialises in the field of geographic profiling. She believes Griffiths moving to that particular red light district was as calculated as everything else in his murderous career.
Stephen Griffiths deliberately placed himself right in the heart of the red light district in Bradford. It's an area that's gone through periods of regeneration over the years, but it's never quite got rid of the issue. And consequently, it's quite a lively commercial area during the day, but at night time, it's absolutely deserted, apart from the prostitutes or sex workers who are looking for business and their customers who are out there. And it's quite an intimidating, dark, desolate place to be at night.
At the same time, he's struggling, it seems to me, to try and establish a kind of relatively normal life. He's trying to have relationships with women. They're failing because he already has some of the early signs of mental obsessional compulsive behavior, and as soon as these women see this, the relationships fall apart.
In 1998, Griffiths' increasingly warped behavior was to destroy any chance of a normal relationship. When a girl he was keen on came to his flat and found an arsenal of crossbows, hundreds of books on serial killing, and the whole place covered in plastic sheeting, she made her excuses and left, and never saw him again.
His ego strength is sufficiently fragile in terms of confidence with women that he then turns his back on relationships and increasingly isolates himself. Because of his criminal history as well, I understand that his relationship with his family broken down, so that no longer is also the potential for at least some sort of positive intervention in this deterioration of his lifestyle.
Griffiths turned to the internet, gorging on hardcore pornography, building a fictional character that could carry out his darkest fantasies in the virtual world, an outlandish alter ego called Pariah.
I don't know what it meant for him. Pariah obviously is a specter, a vengeful specter, with potential for dire violence.
The internet does seem to have been significant in the origins of his offending. It did provide him with information about other serial killers. It provided him with pornography, including violent pornography. I think another thing that the internet does, which might be relevant to this case, is that people on social media sometimes do create a kind of persona. Also, somebody being in their room on their own. It does create a sort of anonymity and lack of comeback, and in which people can create a persona where really the sky's the limit. They can be what they want to be online.
The prospects of Stephen Griffiths having a successful, happy life, and he was putting a lot of his energy into this alter ego, this other persona that was a much stronger, more successful, but ultimately extremely brutal, destructive. And he was going to settle for that. And he was only going to settle for it if it was public. It had to be public. People had to know that Pariah was there. Pariah for him was the persona that he needed to inhabit to become a serial killer. Stephen Griffiths wasn't capable of that.
In 2004, Griffiths took a step nearer to turning his fictional character into reality by legitimizing his dark obsessions when he applied to do a postgraduate degree.
Unfortunately, in this period, this isolation process continued to the point of pathology. He's obsessed with serial killing. And he carries this obsession and his intelligent, articulate persona and his first in psychology at Leeds to the University of Bradford, where in spite of his history of instability, in spite of him having declared to a probation officer that he will kill, he will murder when he's in his early 30s, in spite of previous criminal record of violence and threats with knives, the University of Bradford takes him on as a PhD student. In what subject? Serial killing. This is perfect for Griffiths. This is ideal. He can, with formal, official, academic sanction, pursue his pathology.
When he talked about it himself, he said, well, what I'm doing is I study people who kill people. And that was his real interest. And pursuing it in a very different way to say, perhaps a forensic psychiatrist like myself would take an interest in the life of people who've killed. I'm doing it to try and understand them and treat them. That's my job. He wasn't doing it for that. He was doing it for excitement, to find out what it would feel like, find out what the consequences would be in terms of detections. He was doing it for very different motives. But because he presented it as a sort of historical review, nobody raised an eyebrow. If he'd gone to the university and saying, I want to have a close look at people who kill people, I'm sure somebody at the university would have said, well, hang on a minute, this is a bit weird. But because he presented it as a sort of historical thesis, everybody thought, well, no, that's fine.
I think that his choice of a PhD in criminology, focusing on serial offending, simply feeds into the preoccupation that he did develop with this sort of person. And in the reading, he would have bolstered his view of the desirability, of the fame, of the importance of these people. After all, these are individuals that he is reading about in a serious academic literature long after they have finished doing what they're doing. Now for him, it's much easier to actually join that club rather than do the difficult academic work and get the badge.
Griffiths spent the next 6 years doing a part-time degree studying the comparison between 19th century and modern murder techniques. Alongside his twisted interests, his left-field appearance wasn't conducive to keeping a low profile.
He was not an anonymous type of man. He was quite, noticeable. He kept strange habits that he, didn't hide, and he was seen as a bit of an oddball. So he may wanted to sort of mould into the fabric of life in the apartment block and the immediacy around it. Even the people who lived close to him and the managers of the block where he lived were getting increasingly concerned about his behaviour.
By 2008, Griffiths' neighbours had reported him to the police. CCTV was installed in the building so that he could be kept under surveillance.
This too is a kind of perverse indictment, but the police have no power to intervene until there's been a crime committed. They can be as concerned as they like about the potential for it, but they can't intervene until it's happened.
Despite being watched 24/7 by the security cameras, there was no stopping Griffiths from fulfilling his ambition to become a serial killer.
He did give a well, a declaration on MySpace shortly before the first killing that he's known to have committed occurred, in which he really seemed to echo a statement made by Francis Dolarhyde in the book Red Dragon. It's all about a sense of becoming, and finally his life has led to this point where he's going to become something that other people find, well, astounding or inspiring. It's as if his time has come.
In a dark tribute, Griffiths set his sights on sex workers in the local red light district, like his hero, Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper.
He was now really on the cusp of murdering. He's very close to it. He's also using prostitutes for sex, so he's turned his back on any attempt to have normal relationships. And he's completely now obsessed with serial killing. It's filling his life, and he then kills.
People target vulnerable groups because they're just that. They're vulnerable groups, they're easy. It was the case that there were more unresolved killings of prostitutes, female prostitutes, in the UK than any other group. Why is that? It's because they have a high-risk lifestyle. These workers often move from area to area. They only have glancing friendships within an area where they're working, and then at short notice they may move elsewhere. So they're not easily missed. There isn't a register, there isn't a check. In addition to that, they become very close physically to people who perhaps they shouldn't. It makes them easy prey to someone like Griffiths.
On the 22nd of June 2009, 43-year-old mother of three, Susan Rushworth, disappeared after getting off a bus just half a mile from Stephen Griffiths' flat. She was a known sex worker. It's believed that Griffiths lured her back to his flat before killing her with a crossbow and dismembering her body in the bath. Susan Rushworth's remains have never been found.
He has done this deliberately, consciously, as part of the persona that he wishes to be, as part of his monstrous, strong, ruthless alter ego. And that's been Pariah. He's giving realization to this monster.
I don't know what his relationship to the crossbow was. That would be the area of interest, really. It clearly made him feel potent. There's obvious sexual analogue between sort of firing a bolt and ejaculating. The killings are sexual to the extent that the firing the bolt into the victim is the equivalent of having a sexual experience with the victim, but without the direct physical involvement.
Less than a year after the first murder, Griffiths targeted 31-year-old mother of two, Shelley Armitage, also a sex worker. She was killed by crossbow and dismembered just like her predecessor. He made sure that he meticulously disposed of the body, even if he was blatant in transporting it.
His decision was to transport the body parts of his victims up to the River Aire. He used public transport to do it, which is, again, shows his arrogance and audaciousness. And the idea was to throw the parts into the river and hopefully they'd sink or wash away. I don't think I've come across another killer who's used public transport to take body parts on to get rid of them.
The first killing obviously gives him pleasure. It's successful, it's violent, but it's the second murder that's particularly significant in one other respect, and this is one where he actually films on his mobile phone gruesome, detailed murder of his torture and murder of his second victim, with his own narrative across this video, this pornographic video that he's made.
The footage of the murder remained on Griffiths' phone, but in an act of sheer incompetence, he lost it on a train, where perversely several members of the public viewed the footage before handing it in.
And here we're looking at whatever happened to the accountability of other people, because before the police actually managed to trace that phone and get it into their possession, it's been seen by at least 3 and probably many other people and viewed as pornographic and sold twice. Not reported to the police, sold for profit by people. Extraordinary.
Once again, Griffiths had evaded capture, despite the cold, hard evidence of the actual offence circulating in cyberspace. He now felt invincible.
The third murder now, because there's absolutely no constraint on him, he is a serial killer. He is giving full vent to this pariah.
On Saturday, the 22nd of May, 2010, the caretaker at Griffiths' apartment block was reviewing CCTV footage from the weekend. As he was fast-forwarding through the tapes, he made a chilling discovery. Captured was Griffiths slaying his final victim, Suzanne Blamirez, as she ran for her life. He had held her captive for 2 days, but the young woman's attempted escape ended with her bloody death. And Griffiths, knowing that the game was up, celebrated by making a defiant gesture to the security cameras.
So there's Griffiths. He's filmed taking a prostitute back to his flat. She tries to escape from him on the CCTV. He comes running out. He drags her back in. He kills her with a crossbow. He then goes up to the camera. He's fully aware of what's happening. He's filming now. He's infamous. And he gestures to the camera.
He goes in front of the CCTV camera and goes like that. As an I don't care, you can see what I've done. I, me, typical again power assertive, who has to tell people and to get notoriety in that way.
It's all about a particular kind of power. It's a sense of having a sense of pride and achieving what you feel is a sense of omnipotent invulnerability. The sense that you don't have to take anybody else into account, and that your life, as I think his was really built on magnifying in his own eyes his own image of himself, both to himself and to the world at large.
This is discovered when the caretaker is reviewing this footage in a routine manner. He sees this, and this concerned citizen, having just witnessed this horrific, barbaric murder, phones the police. But before he phones the police, he phones the Sun newspaper to sell his story.
Having committed 3 murders, Griffiths now felt he'd done enough to reach his goal to be accepted into the Serial Murderer Hall of Fame. So after disposing of the body in the nearby river, he simply sat at home, waiting for the police to arrive.
Griffiths is arrested because he's made no attempt, unlike most serial killers, to avoid arrest. He's satisfied. He has come out. He has cast off this weak body of Stephen Griffiths, and he has become the notorious, infamous, potentially famous serial killer that he wants to be.
I think there's a good chance it did bring a kind of fulfillment, in that it did give him a kind of recognition, which meant that, paradoxically, perhaps for the first time, he felt a place in society, even though it was a bad one, even though it was one that wasn't based on connectedness. At least other people would give him a kind of recognition, even though it was one based upon notoriety, but also well, just a sense of how odd that he was.
During Griffiths' police interviews, he gave an extraordinarily candid insight into his twisted mind, going as far as to describe himself as misanthropic, meaning hateful of the entire human race.
Well, I'm misanthropic. I don't have much time for the human race.
That's a projection. He knows that the human race has no time for him. He hates the human race because the human race has rejected him.
I mean, it's true that he's misanthropic in the sense that he's killed people deliberately and without real immediate reason. But it's a lazy way of describing to himself his reasons for what he's doing. I doubt he knows why he's done what he's done.
Why did you feel the need to kill her?
I don't know. I don't know if I was... So, just... Sometimes you killed someone to kill yourself, or killed Pariah. I don't know. That's like deep issues inside me.
So why did you feel the need to kill any of the girls? Pardon?
I don't know.
It's showing a kind of arrogant indifference and contempt that I'm actually superior. I'm brighter than you. You can ask me any questions as you like. You won't trick me. I'll give you whatever I want. I'm in control of the dialogue. I'm very articulate, very bright. I think he's achieved what his alternate personality has wanted to achieve, that is broken free, Pariah. I think he's achieved what he wanted to achieve. The monster has taken over. The monster has shed this kind of weak skin of Stephen Griffiths, who was a loser and a loner, and the monster is now very much to the fore.
In May 2010, Griffiths appeared before Bradford Magistrates Court. Few who witnessed Griffiths' first appearance would forget it. When asked his name, he scratched his head and arrogantly declared, "The Crossbow Cannibal."
He did that to publicize what he wanted to be described as. This is what he wants to be. I am Pariah, the Crossbow Cannibal. That's my signature line now that I want you to refer to me as, because I am now infamous as a serial killer.
And why adopt for yourself the legend of Crossbow Cannibal? I mean, that's, if anybody's going to do it, you leave that to the media. But to do it yourself, to try and give yourself that label, bespeaks a particular type, well, I'm calling it pride, but really it's arrogance. Bespeaks a particular type of arrogance, which do find routinely associated with sadomasochistic actions and behaviours.
He also had, I believe, appointed the same legal team that defended Sutcliffe. So he's walking in the shoes of what he would admire, perversely, but he would admire. And to live what he would see as the dream of being someone like that. He's clearly got totally deranged, psychopathic ideation towards being a serial killer.
To add to his notoriety, Griffiths claimed to have cannibalized parts of his victims.
He said it because he wanted to be bigger than Sutcliffe, more macabre, more ghastly in the eyes of mere mortals.
He's turning himself into a caricature, isn't it? But he wouldn't have seen it that way, as in his own eyes. He's building himself up as a potent figure. So you can end up as appearing to be something completely different to what you intended. And then I suppose the killings are partly a response to that, aren't they? Right, okay, you so-and-sos, if you're not going to recognise me for what I've done, then I'll show you.
His method and the way that he portrays himself is very much the Rambo style, isn't it? You have the heroic anti-hero who is going out to take his prey wherever he wants it. And by the way, he wants to know that he's not just a run-of-the-mill character, that he has ingenuity, creativity. I have a crossbow. I don't just use a hammer or a knife. Look at me, remember me, you won't forget me.
Griffiths had achieved his macabre life goal, to be infamous like his evil idols.
I think he'd like to view himself, and I use those words carefully, as a real someone in terms of British crime scene, if not the world's crime scene, a real someone. However, when I say he'd like to, tacit in that is that underneath it all, he knows what the rest of us are thinking. And in fact, I won't use the word only, he killed 3, whereas the Ipswich killer of prostitutes killed more than 6 that we know of. Just look at Shipman, for example. Over 225, they think. So he's on the scale of things, minnows. He's killing prostitutes who can't possibly defend themselves against crossbows and the like. And he's proud of it, hence the giving the finger to the CCTV camera. See what I can do.
He is not really regarded as the general hero that he would like to have been. He's very much at the bottom end of things. He is there with the Colin Islands, with the inadequates, with the people who couldn't really make it in the real world. And the only way of demonstrating their prowess was to harm the weak and vulnerable.
Today, Griffiths remains in Long Lartin Prison in Worcestershire on a life sentence. Patient privilege prevents criminal psychologists and psychiatrists from stating openly that they've been directly involved in his treatment. But one thing that is agreed is that his path to becoming a serial killer was anything but conventional. It's hard to look at Griffiths' genesis as a serial killer without thinking that there were many missed opportunities to have stopped him going on to kill.
He told a probation officer years before he was going to kill. He was going to commit murder. What happened to that? That's actually an offense. That's a threat to kill. And nothing was done. I mean, he was signaling for years his intent. It's extraordinary. And it is, this is very judgmental, but it's a kind of indictment of the society in which we live.
There's even talk now, which I personally find outrageous, of him continuing his PhD from jail at Bradford. Well, I don't know, it's for others to judge, but I think that's outrageous, particularly given the subject matter concerned.
So the question remains, can a self-made monster like Griffiths be reformed?
As a psychiatrist, the most difficult aspect of psychopathy I've found to treat is arrogance. People who establish themselves as arrogant find it extremely difficult to depart from that and to recognize their vulnerability.